Well, a week from today, California leaders and Republicans will try to make their case in court as to whether the state should keep its new congressional district maps.
Yeah, California voters approved those maps last month to give Democrats even more of an advantage in future elections. Now, this all comes as the United States Supreme Court allows Texas to keep its new maps that favors Republicans. KCRA 3 political director Ashley Zavala joins us with the update. Ashley.
Lisa, we're hearing from experts who say that because the Supreme Court is allowing Texas to keep its new maps, California also likely will be able to keep its maps. Texas faced a lawsuit that claimed the state was racially gerrymandering or redrawing those maps to suppress some voters. California faces a similar lawsuit with claims of racial gerrymandering, but that the state's maps favor Latino voters over others. But the Supreme Court signaling it sees this for how it's been described publicly for the last several months. These states are just trying to give their dominant political party the upper hand in future elections. In the Supreme Court's order last week, Justice Alito noted, quote, the impetus for the adoption of the Texas map, like the map subsequently adopted in California, was partisan advantage, pure and simple. So how could this map impact next week's hearing? That's to be seen. A lower federal court in the Central District of California will hold the first hearing on Proposition 50 December 15th. That's in Los Angeles. Court records show both sides of the issue have a list of 39 possible witnesses total that could testify, including Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas and former State Senate Leader Mike McGuire. It's not clear exactly how long that hearing will last, but those close to the case tell me likely 2 or 3 days down there in LA. Regardless of how the lower court decides, attorneys representing Republicans are confident the Supreme Court will have the final say here. I checked in with adjunct McGeorge School of Law professor Chris McKaylee.
Would that be unprecedented if they were to allow Texas to have its maps, but then did find that California did violate the Voting Rights Act?
Yes, I think that would first be a deeply troubling determination if that were to come forth, because I think that would be wrong on the legal merits. But obviously it would be in direct contravention to what they've done in Texas. So they should be intellectually consistent and apply the same standards to any state. Now, as a separate matter, I think it is problematic that the U.S. Supreme Court, in its 6-3 majority, has essentially declined to entertain, in Texas at least, consideration of particularly the Federal Voting Rights Act. This court majority has been leaning in one particular direction, which is to substantially dilute the provisions of the Federal Voting Rights Act, and I think that's problematic. But again, in the Texas decision, they essentially said a political motive can overpower all of those other potential concerns.
But gerrymandering is essentially okay.
That is essentially what the U.S. Supreme Court has said, and I think those who believe in the fundamental tenets of the Federal Voting Rights Act find that to be deeply problematic.
So we'll see what happens here in California over the next couple of weeks. Now, we know both sides want a decision in this state as soon as possible so that candidates know which districts exactly they're representing or running for in the upcoming 2026 election.
Yeah, some important information.
Right.
So how are California Republicans reacting to that Supreme Court decision in Texas?
Right. Well, despite that, and some experts claiming they're going to do essentially the same thing here in California, I mean, the Republicans, they're still feeling confident. We should note that the U.S. Department of Justice, led by the Trump administration, has gotten involved in the case against California's maps, but they'd never got involved in Texas. It's to be seen if that helps sway the nation's highest court, if they decide to also even issue an order in California's case. Again, a lot to be seen here, but they're on a sort of condensed timeline again, given that the filing deadline here in California to decide if you're running is in March.
We'll know soon.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks,